Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Pride and Prejudice. Chapter 20. Lydia is married. The whole family hoped for a letter from Mr. Bennet the next morning, but nothing came. Mr. Gardiner had waited only for the mail before setting off. Mrs. Bennet fretted needlessly that her husband might be killed in a duel. Meanwhile, all Meryton condemned Wickham, the man they once adored. It was said he had left debts to every tradesman in town. Everyone said he was the wickedest young man in the world. Each day that passed at Longbourn was filled with anxiety. The Bennets lived for only news of Lydia. Finally, Mr. Gardiner wrote to say their father was coming home. He had not been able to locate Lydia. Mrs. Bennet was beside herself. "Who will fight Wickham and make him marry Lydia if he comes home?" she wailed. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long for an answer. 2 days after Mr. Bennet's return, a letter came from Mr. Gardiner. Mr. Bennet was so worried he had Elizabeth read the letter out loud. It said, "My dear brother, I have seen them both. They are not married, but I do hope they will marry before too long. All that is required of you is to assure Lydia that you will still give her equal share of the £5,000 left on your death. Also, that you give her £100 a year. I think this is reasonable. Mr. Wickham's circumstances aren't as hopeless as we thought. If you give me the power to act in your name, the whole business will be settled as quickly as possible. We have decided it's best that Lydia should be married in my house. Yours, Edward Gardiner." The good news quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. For her part, Elizabeth was now sorry that she had made Mr. Darcy acquainted with her fears for her sister, since the marriage would hopefully conceal the scandal of the elopement. She had no fear of his revealing any details. There were few people on whose secrecy she could so confidently depend. Still, she was humiliated that he knew so much about her family. She also knew that Lydia's marriage meant that Wickham was now part of the Bennet family. Would Mr. Darcy ever propose to her again, knowing that a man he hated was to be his wife's brother-in-law? It was awful, thought Elizabeth. What would he think if he knew the proposal I turned down 4 months ago I would now so gratefully accept? She knew that he was the right man for her. Her understanding and temperament, his talents and compassion would have been an ideal match. How happy they might have been. But thoughts of Lydia finally pushed Mr. Darcy out of her mind. Wickham and her sister were finally married, and a day later they arrived in Longbourn. Her mother stepped forward to embrace her runaway daughter. Mr. Bennet was much less cordial. "Good gracious, what fun this has been! Who knew I would return home married?" Lydia laughed. Her insensitivity upset Jane, Elizabeth, and their father. They studied Wickham carefully. His affection for Lydia was not equal to hers for him. Their elopement was the result of Lydia's passion, not his. Yet both sisters wanted to hear the details of her wedding. "I was worried that we would never get to the church on time. Uncle had business to settle on me. But I needn't have worried. Mr. Darcy was there to give me away if necessary," Lydia confessed. "Mr. Darcy?" cried Elizabeth. "I can't say more. I promised Wickham." Nothing more was said, but Elizabeth could only guess that Mr. Darcy had acted nobly on her sister's behalf. She could not understand the suspense any longer and wrote to her aunt, begging for an answer. Elizabeth did not have to wait long for her reply. Her aunt explained that Darcy had come to visit them because he felt somewhat responsible for Wickham. He blamed his own pride for not informing the others of Wickham's worthlessness. He had found out where Lydia was. He could not convince her to leave Wickham, so he can convince Wickham to marry her. "I must also confide in total secrecy that it is Darcy who is paying Wickham's debts and giving another £1,000 to Lydia, in addition to what your father has given her. I can only say that both your uncle and I respect and admire him very much," she concluded. The letter threw Elizabeth into a highly emotional state. She was amazed that he had done all this, that he had paid for the man he had most wished to avoid. He had done this all for her. "We owe everything to him." Elizabeth spoke aloud to herself. "Oh, how I regret every unkindness I've ever shown to him." She was proud of him, and proud that he had loved her, even though that love was probably now lost forever. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.